Cents Per Mile, featuring Charles Gracie and Paul Gibson, with loads of recruiting and marketing experience and backed by the largest driver audience in the world. We deliver carriers the driver perspective, find solutions, and help make sense make sense.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. What are we talking about today, Charles?
Students, new drivers. Is the system broken? Is it working? And what can we do better?
Yes.
All of the above?
Yep. Yeah, that's a hot one. Definitely don't want to get started now because we probably won't stop. So let's do the things that we do every episode real quick. We are on Amazon Music, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, basically anywhere that you get your podcasts. So if you could, wherever you consume them, if you could like, subscribe, rate, it helps push us out a little bit further, gets us some momentum, and we get to do even cooler stuff than the cool stuff that we've already done.
Yeah, or you can go to centspermilepodcast.com. You can suggest a topic to be a guest or even to become a sponsor.
Sponsor? Who's our sponsor today, Charles?
MyCarrierPortal. Trusted by brokers and preferred by carriers, Descartes' MyCarrierPortal is the industry's #1 onboarding and fraud prevention platform. Less friction, more trust, faster onboarding. That's Descartes' MyCarrierPortal. Check them out at mycarrierportal.com.
All right. Well, it's time for the news. All right, so it's time for the news where we go and we find some of the most interesting, cringy, wonderful, crazy, whatever stories, fancy us, from the past couple weeks. And so we're going to check some out. So the first one is the Trump administration wants to cut the FMCSA workforce by 7%. There's no reductions planned for the Office of Safety, according to the FY26 budget request. So basically they want to cut the workforce by 7%. And what that does is it still provides the necessary resources for the FMCSA's dedicated workforce to uphold safety mandates effectively and efficiently, focusing on core responsibilities and modernizing critical systems and applying for common sense principles to regulatory oversight. Sounds like the FMCSA said that. So the agency priorities, fraud prevention, shout out to our sponsor today with MyCarrierPortal. Great drop. The customer contact center.
Wait, you can contact the FMCSA?
Kind of.
Do they answer questions better than when they come to conferences?
It took me like 3 weeks to find out if I could get Pete Buttigieg on the podcast.
Well, he hasn't been on, so we know how that went.
Yeah, but it took 3 weeks to get a no. Yeah, and then maybe that'll cut it down. Broker and freight forwarder financial responsibility rule, trying to continue to develop policies and procedures to implement the broker and freight forwarder financial responsibility rule. So it's kind of like the broker transparency rule that's supposed to take effect this year or next year. Modernized registration system, vetting expansion,
put me in, coach.
Then crash data analytics. Okay.
Yes.
What's
you called upon me.
I just wanted to finish the list. You're good.
All right. So what I find interesting on this is, I covered this story the other day, and what was unique about it is the follow-up story that we're not actually covering here, but it was talking about where all the DOT numbers are popping up in Texas and California, and that 40% of them have not gotten their inspection that they're supposed to get. So they run for a couple months, they shut down. I'm wondering if it's not a smart idea to shut down the Vetin expansion and to send that out to private companies to do. I'm thinking it might be more efficient. We got to be able to bet more than 40%.
Yeah. I don't know that I love that. I don't love it to start with, per se. And so to do it at that point like that, without naming names, I believe there was a company who tried to pose sort of like that's what they were doing, and that didn't go very well.
Yeah, but do you really like all the DOT numbers and MCs opening up and then shutting down and operating under different DOT? I think some way to regulate that would not only give transparency and help combat the fraud, but I also think it offers a more viable solution than, hey, we inspected 40% of the new DOT numbers.
Well, you know me and my extremist views. So what I would say is this is a good opportunity, just like almost every opportunity is. What it really boils down to is going after symptoms and not actual issues. And I think at that point, if you're going to revisit that, why don't we just revisit the Motor Carrier Act of 1980?
What a novel idea.
I know, that's where all those problems come from. But anyway, so the next one, the FMCSA to eliminate DEI and climate change requirements from CDL compliance programs. Basically, it's just not part of what you need to get the grant anymore. And yeah, so it basically the CDLPI program awards funding to state CDL programs to achieve compliance with federal licensing and programmatic standards. The goal of the program is to reduce crashes involving commercial vehicles by providing only vetted and qualified drivers CDLs, consolidating documentation requirements to include only one driving record and only one licensing document for these drivers, commonly referred to as the one driver, one license, one record, and ensuing a complete and accurate driver histories for CDL holders are secure and maintained.
Can we just talk about your excitement on this one?
Well, so okay, so a little backstory to putting this in as a news story. I went to go look at what the Biden era DEI and climate change policies were in relation to this. There weren't really any. Like it's attached to, so like when Sean Duffy started talking about it, it's related more to like infrastructure type rules where like, you know, building bridges and stuff like that, like you had to make sure that like, you know, greenhouse gases and stuff like that weren't going to go over there. We're like, these people trying to get their CDLs aren't exactly like, I don't know what kind of greenhouse gases they're emitting by training. It didn't, you know, yeah. And I mean,
it's just typical government, you know, complicated one car funeral scenario.
Right. And, you know, the demographic of trucking has been changing enough that I don't know that like any sort of, you know, affirmative action requirements or anything that someone wants to cry about are really would have not been just naturally met. You know, like, I mean, aside from like the English speaking part, but I don't.
Woo woo.
Yeah. Like I just don't know in this really what it did.
Paul, I have to do it. What's your views on the English proficiency?
I mean, I think that that's important. Right?
I hope so.
I mean, you got to be able to read the signs and communicate
and speak basic English. It's only been in the book for how long now?
Right. But like considering like the amount of the workforce that is immigrants, I can't imagine that like, I mean, there've been obviously a couple instances that are easy to point to, but that's what we do as a society. We take the worst case scenarios and we just make those the highlight. I mean, I agree with it.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I don't think it's as much of a problem quite as like some people make it out to be, but it's an issue.
They've already issued out, don't quote me on it, but at least half a dozen warnings in Texas alone to people that might be affected by this. I think it's one of those things where...
Well, but okay, so Texas is an interesting one. So, because there's going to be cross-border drivers. I guess, how would you feel if someone going cross-border had to be able to speak and read Spanish in order to cross the border?
If I lived in Mexico and I had a family on those roadways. I'd hope that they can understand basic road signs. Otherwise, I become a hazard, and I'd hope someone would tell me I shouldn't be here.
Right. But
I mean,
I would be interested in what the reaction to that would be.
if I go to Japan and I start driving around, I better understand the signs. Otherwise, I become a risk. I think it's a safety thing, and I'm a huge advocate for it. It's only been in the book forever.
Yeah. No, I agree. But I also think it's like certain other instances where like the percentage is it is an issue. It is an absolute issue. I'm 100% for it.
But I have a new business opportunity.
I just also think it's blown out of proportion. What?
I think that there's going to come this point because when trucks get put out of service, generally you repair the truck, and then you get to put it back at work. But it's not like someone's going to pop out an English teacher. So companies are going to have to recover trucks. I'm kind of seeing an opportunity there. Get to travel the nation recovering trucks for people that got shut down that obviously are going to need more than a day to return to duty.
I don't. What do you mean? I guess.
Well, if you
what's different than that between that and just like repoing trucks already?
Well, now you're going to have to go get them. You're not just going to be able to repair them and put them back on the road. Like, it's not like, hey, Paul, you can't pass an English test. You're going to be able to pass it tomorrow. How many tries are they going to give you? It's not like you can go to a dictionary and learn the entire language overnight.
Right. So I guess but like, I imagine that person's already out of service and probably like removed in some sort of circumstance with the way things currently are. So I imagine the truck's just sitting there and you got to go get it back.
Yeah, we can start a recovery business.
That's already a thing.
It's not as prevalent.
Yeah, but also I've heard some stories of some drivers going doing recoveries. I don't know that I want to get in a lot of those
stats
trucks.
On that right now. I'll have to pull them for our next episode, but there's stats that the rise of drivers pulling off when DOT drives away when they're out of service are on the rise right now. I'm interested to dive into that. That's one of those things that came up from one of my callers the other day, and they're like, have you seen this stat? And I pulled it up, and sure enough, yeah, it's on the rise. I never would have thought of it like, oh, you're out of service, here's a sticker, and then, oh, he's gone, let me just drive away. Like, do you collect them on the side of your truck like, bumper stickers?
Wow. So hold on. So they're driving off after they get put out of service?
Yeah, the officer isn't going to sit there and babysit you like you've been put out of service. And historically, that just means you get it fixed and you return to duty. But now they're just driving off.
Well, if you ain't moving, you ain't earning. I feel like that's, your captain culture. I feel like that's a culture that we built.
I'm also like, hey, they're putting you out of service for a reason. Wouldn't it be easier just to fix it, roll out there safely?
Well, I mean, you only get in trouble if you get caught. No, I would agree. There's a reason why they're out of service. Speaking of,
there's a reason why you're my co-host.
I believe this story is out of service. So it's time to go behind the desk with Tenstreet.
So now it's time to go behind the desk with Tenstreet, and we got Teresa Krimbill joining us. How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you, Charles?
It's another day. We're having a great show. We had some good news, and I always look forward to going behind the desk with you guys. We're talking new students and new CDL holders.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that Tenstreet actually has a school network. So we actually have probably 100 or so, maybe more schools in our network that we work with.
All right. So what's that look like?
Yeah, so we work with schools in the capacity of trying to introduce their drivers into getting jobs. So the introduction of what does the CDL application look like, getting them into our network of drivers, introducing them to Driver Pulse so that they can find carriers who are hiring entry-level drivers. And so that is what our network is all about, is trying to connect these schools with carriers and vice versa. And then, of course, ultimately getting these students jobs.
Well, I imagine they're appreciative of that, because I can tell you at one point when I first got my CDL, it was different times than it is today, but I was getting slammed with people. Apply here, do this, do that. And each one's different in their own regard. Depends on what you're looking for. I chose the path of getting my CDL on my own dollar and then turning around and being able to pick from who was going to be best for me. But then some people actually get them through a company, and it's a little bit more streamlined for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we work with both capacities. We definitely, I would say, majority have the route that you went, right? Getting your CDL on your own and having your own choices. But we actually just changed the filters on Pulse as well. So drivers can actually select 0 to 6 months experience now and look for carriers who hire in that range. So it makes it really easy because sometimes it is a little bit of a guesswork when you're graduating and you try to find a job and you don't know who's hiring right out of school students.
Well, and it's got to be easier than the job fairs I used to have to go to as a student, where you go there and you're talking to 100 people, and then the offers blur together because you're talking to 100 different people in a single day, a couple hours.
Yeah, definitely. And Pulse kind of manages that, right? Where you can have different profiles and you can refer back to those people and those conversations and keeps it organized for those students. So, yeah, that's I don't know, job fairs are kind of fun though.
They are,
You get
but
free swag, you know.
in the day of technology that we live in, I like being able to compare and contrast without having someone boop, 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 in one ear and then someone else. And then it's overwhelming as a new driver coming into the industry because you're getting a lot of information, kind of elevator pitch style, and then you walk away and sometimes those things blur. And we've seen it a lot on the recruiting side where drivers create their own magic offer and it's the best parts of each job. And then by the time they show up to orientation, they're like, you said this. And it's like, no, we didn't.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we can help manage on the driver poll side, and again, kind of categorizing and keeping track of who did I have a conversation with, and how far am I down this rabbit hole, and then of course being able to refer back to benefits and company policies. All of that is now visible on Pulse, so they can always refer
That's
back to as a cheat sheet.
That's pretty cool stuff, and I imagine it's helpful. It wasn't that way when I got my CDL, so I'm pretty excited for what that means for today's drivers entering in because they already have enough obstacles on their path to becoming experienced drivers. If you can
Agreed.
simplify it on the front end, that seems pretty cool to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Benefits Tenstreet, benefits our carriers, benefits the students. Schools get higher replacement or placement rates. So I think all around it's a win. We also partner with associations like the CVTA. So there's portions of our software that are free for those association members. So it's pretty nice. It's a pretty nice gig.
It's pretty cool stuff. Are you seeing more schools out there, more students entering the market? Are there any kind of cool stats along that front?
Yeah, I would definitely say, especially with the government grants, getting more people to get CDLs, I would say there's definite an increase in that. It's actually kind of shocking how many schools don't care about placement rates of their students. But there are really passionate schools out there who care about getting their students jobs and all of that. But yeah, we are seeing an uptick in more students getting jobs. I think the freedom and then the travel aspect of it for these young kids of being able to not have to pay a bunch of bills and kind of live on the road is an attractive lifestyle for some younger kids. So
I wonder if you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing as far as less carriers hiring students right now, though.
yes.
So
Yeah,
we got more students entering in and then less carriers hiring students. I even know of some carriers that have their own driving programs and they're still putting students through them, but they're not actually hiring those students. They're just helping them get CDLs and setting them loose. And I'm like, well, like I understand the mentality if you're at capacity, but it seems like these students are running out of avenues to go down right now.
Yeah, I would say we see a good amount. I actually would just asked about that statistic on our end because we have the ability to see who hires in those years of experience. So to be decided on that statistic, but I did ask, and maybe it's something that we can scrounge together and send to you. But we do have a number of carriers that you'd be surprised that hire entry level students. And again, they want reputation, reputable schools, and knowing that they're going to be hiring some safe drivers. So trying to connect that and make that more prevalent, giving schools some lists of carriers in their area who do hire students, making that more available as far as knowledge is concerned is something that we definitely want to increase.
Well, that's some great stuff, and I look forward to any kind of stats you guys have on that. But I think I just came up with a new idea for a cents per mile down the line. We could do a cents per mile job fair where we have everyone come on and talk about their new student jobs that they have available. Because there's a lot of them out there that I talk to that say no one's hiring. Where do I look?
You should do that. I think that's what now 3 different business ventures that you've come up with on this podcast.
I'm chasing a dream. I want that white picket fence one day.
It's awesome.
No, I appreciate you spending the time with us and always look forward to going behind the desk.
All right. Thanks, Charles.
Trusted by brokers and preferred by carriers. Descartes MyCarrierPortal is the industry's most reliable onboarding and fraud prevention platform. Carriers save time and win more freight, while brokers gain confidence through verified partners. Experience greater discoverability in your customer's carrier network with our easy-to-use system. Less friction, more trust, faster onboarding. That's Descartes MyCarrierPortal.
All right, and it's time for our main topic to make sense. Real quick, though, to bounce back before something gets clipped out and it sounds weird. Like, yes, like I want to establish again the English language requirement obviously has been there forever. It's important. It makes sense, and that's what we're doing right here is making sense. I just don't know, like there's so many other problems. Why, I feel like the effect of that one, there's so many other bigger problems that we don't address.
That's a pretty big one.
It is, but the
and it kind of goes hand in hand with today's topic,
right?
New students coming in, I think that expectation should be set right there. If you're a CDL school and you know that this is a requirement for these people to have gainful employment, you should be filtering them out on the front end. Shame on you if you're not.
But the thing is so to that effect, the drivers who are driving around maybe that are proficient in English, regardless of being able to read signs or communicate, they're successfully driving trucks. These kids coming out of school, sometimes they're not doing that part.
Well, I think it is a very holistic approach. Hey, that school should be expected to not only teach you the basic rules of the road, to gain you experience behind the wheel, make sure that you're safely able to operate a commercial motor vehicle, to help you get licensed, to teach you all the intricacies to come out the gate. And obviously there's more training, but why couldn't they vet out someone that can't speak or write basically English? To me, that's ludicrous to think that shouldn't be done at a school level. I mean, they still got to take drug tests to make sure they're employable at a lot of schools. They still got to go through, the work history. So why? Yeah. Because
they need people to go to those schools, because when people get out of those schools and they get a taste of what it's like to be over the road, they don't stick around.
I think it's setting those expectations early on. I went to a really good school, and it's a shame because they're not around anymore, but I went to a really good school. They over-taught you, and they almost ran it boot camp style. There was this guy, Jimmy, great instructor, ex-military, and he expected you to not only know your pre-trip, but to learn the things in a timely manner, to stick around after the class if you needed extra help. And by the time you left there, if you went to that school, you were pretty successful. Their success rate to transition into a job and stick with that job for at least 6 months was really impressive. It's one of the reasons I chose that school. But then I've been to other schools where they pump them out like a puppy mill. And I think that's where it's a quality measure. It's those schools have a responsibility to these students to make sure that they're either detouring away the ones that shouldn't be coming in or aren't coming in for the right reasons, or to be training the ones that should.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because, sure, you went through that training. They made sure you knew everything, right? How long ago was that?
Years ago.
Okay, cool. So if someone straight up walked you through everything, the experience, what to expect right now, would you still have done it?
Yeah. I love the industry. I came in with the right expectations, and I went through an interview process to make sure it was something, because this school that I went to had 100% job placement.
Right. But I'm saying the state of things now. Would you get back in a truck?
Yeah.
Okay.
The industry as a whole, remove family and all that, just looking at the industry, I would. I love the industry. I love trucking. I wouldn't trade my time in a cab at all. But I do think it comes down to how I entered. If I entered under the same premise that I did back then and had that same support and training, then absolutely, my expectations would be aligned. If I came into a place that pumped me through like a puppy mill, I'm probably not going to be successful. And then you look at the industry as a whole. When we're looking at students right now, you hear a lot of people have different ideas. Like past episode, we had someone come on and talk about how they heard about targeting people that were aging out at orphanages. Then we had people talk about we need younger drivers. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. I think we need better drivers. We need better expectations, and we need to strengthen our training so these individuals are safe out there, but also successful. Because the one thing worse than not having enough drivers are bringing in the wrong people and setting them up for failure, because 2 months, 3 months down the road, they get a couple tickets. They do have an accident, unfortunately, and then they're unemployable.
Mm-hmm. But I would say from a business perspective, which is usually what you take, trucking, if you're operating at a 6% profit margin, you're killing it. You're destroying it. Like, you're nailing it, right? So, like, I would say that the opposite is actually true from a business standpoint, that it is better to bring in the wrong people and hopefully get a little bit out of them than it is to bring in the right people. Maybe not on paper, but in practice, because I tell you what, it's like people say all the time, there's not a driver shortage. There's just, depending on who you ask, there's either a lack of quality jobs, or depending on who you ask, there's a lack of quality drivers. I think both, not to the driver's fault because of just the state of training and that kind of thing. I think that you would have a driver shortage if you actually set up that sort of process to go through to get your CDL.
Well, I don't believe in the driver shortage. I think there's a shortage of drivers willing to do a job. I think that for the pay that's being offered, I think there's a shortage of qualified drivers based on today's standards. Right. And I think what feeds that is the fact that we're not doing training the right way. I think we as an industry need to focus on safety and expectations, and that should be handled at a school level, not only to make the students successful with their transition into their first employer, but also make them successful beyond that to their second employer and third employer and for years to come. I think that expectation should be aligned at a school level, at a first employer level. And I think strengthening those relationships between the first employer and the schools is the answer to that. I think if those first employers could sit there and say, hey, this person's not going to make it based on these records, because I'd be interested to get the stat, but I see it a lot on the recruiting side. How many people came through a school, was told that they could get a job and be successful in trucking, and that's not the case. You have some of the felon reentry programs that promote CDLs. In a market a couple years ago, those people could find a job. In today's market, where most carriers are near capacity, they're allowed to be very selective. That is a risk versus reward that is not indicative of the market we sit in right now and the positioning of the carriers. So these people are now entering a workforce. They've spent time or money or both, and they're unemployable.
Yeah, that's why, they call it the SAP program, because it moves real slow when you're trying to find a job opportunity, and it gets sticky most of the time. But either way, I think we basically agreed on most of that. But what I'm saying is, if you laid out the expectations of what it is now versus when you started, if you clearly laid out the expectations, set somebody up to succeed, there's jobs now that require way less, that pay more. And have better benefits. So why would they, up front, if you sell it correctly for what it is, you're going, that's what I meant by because I don't obviously believe in the driver shortage, but I'm saying if you eliminate that flow, especially with drivers aging out, I think that you'd kind of maybe be setting one up.
And I'm going to set people up. You can clip what I'm about to say, and you should. Put it at the beginning of your driver training program at any CDL school. Drivers, if you're in a class right now, you are not getting local. End clip.
I don't know, man. I've seen, it's not the same, obviously, but I've seen and maybe it's just my For You page, but on TikTok, I've been getting a lot of people that are like, oh, I got my CDL. It's the best. I make money. And then I'll go check out their page, just because I'm oh, who are the upcoming influencers and stuff? And most of them are hustlers, yard jockeys. But that is a good clip. You should take that and put it at the beginning of your student orientations. But yeah, is there any?
I'm here to serve. What I say?
Yeah. No, I love that. But we've got about a minute left. I would say if you had to give one piece of advice to a company who's like bringing on students or a CDL school, what would you give them as advice? The number one actionable item they could do to make drivers successful going through their programs?
Align expectations. Educate and align expectations. If you can spend a moment to sit down and see what drives that individual and make sure that it's aligned with the industry and that their expectations are aligned as such, they will be successful. But if you don't, and you just pump them through and say, hey, figure it out, they're going to have a bad time. You're going to have a bad reputation, and we're going to continue to put puppies through the grinder.
Yep. And then, yeah, I mean, but also at the same time, we've normalized 100% turnover. So that's just the way things are. Hopefully maybe one day we'll fix it. This seems like a good opportunity, but it is time to go.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.